Hello, everyone. So happy Wednesday. Welcome back to CoinViewer Clips. My name is Jessica, and joining me now, I am very thrilled to have Michael van der Pope, who is a trader previously with Amsterdam Stock Exchange, now Crypto Mike NL on Twitter and YouTube. Michael, I've had the pleasure of interviewing you a few times over the years, and what better time to touch base with markets looking the way they are? How are you doing today?
Well, aside from the fact that I've just been enjoying some Dutch rain, it's all going pretty well. I mean, the markets are up, so it feels great after 2 years. I think everybody is getting a little bit more hyped right now, so it's a good week. Finally, we
It
have
is
been
a good
waiting for
week.
it.
It's true. So we touched base in IRL in Bitcoin Amsterdam recently. It was also raining there, so I also got to experience some Netherlands rain. And yeah, it's absolutely fantastic to see markets moving the way they are. We're going to touch on a few of the potential catalysts and what to expect next over this live stream. We also are going to interact with any of the questions that do come through as well. That's the beauty of one of these live calls. So if anyone does have any questions they would like to give Michael, take the opportunity to pick his brain. Absolutely, I encourage you to do so. So, Michael, should we jump on in?
Sure, let's go.
Okay, awesome. So we've got to start with the big orange elephant in the room. We have the kind of the spot Bitcoin ETF, IBTC, the proposed ticker for BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF, appeared on DTCC. Sign the approval was on the way, which was a very bullish indicator. We then saw Bitcoin shoot up above 30,000 US dollars. The ticker disappeared and then reappeared. Crypto, Twitter, or rather X now, was in a little bit of a frenzy, but actually the price stayed pretty strong. I think it didn't dip below 33,000 US dollars per Bitcoin. So I want to get your take on the price action that we have seen this week. And were you surprised that the price has held this week?
Well, I think there are so many things happening right now. And the first thing is that, especially within the crypto Twitter or crypto X, whatever you would like to call it, the fanatics are so focused on every news item that if DTCC, I'm also struggling with it, is removing the BlackRock ticker, you see the price drop. Price didn't drop because of that. There were some data points from the US coming out. And as a matter of fact, the ticker was on there since August already. So there's nothing new on there. The fact that price is currently some actual pressure buying Bitcoin, which is the fact that the chances of an ETF to be approved have not been as high as it is right now. So Eric has been saying this, and he is an ETF watcher from Bloomberg. He has been mentioning that BlackRock is currently feeding the actual ETF. And the question is, what does that mean? All the companies that are applying for an ETF or spot ETF, they need to have collateral. With a futures ETF, you don't need to have specific Bitcoin in your collateral towards your clients. But when you are applying for a spot Bitcoin ETF, approximately 30 to 40% of the collateral needs to be there when you go live. We also know that BlackRock is currently in contact with the SEC, and all the other parties are doing the exact same. And they are getting comments from the SEC, and now they adjust the actual application. And because they're adjusting it, the chances of having the approval will be growing over time. So what do they need to do in order to have the approval and to list it? They need to buy Bitcoin. So all those parties are currently getting the Bitcoin for as a collateral, so they are ready to go live. And that's why you see the momentum being so strong at this point. And then second, we also have the case of people understanding the actual impact of a spot ETF, hence why people are currently feeling the FOMO of being into the markets. And then additionally, we've got the case of Grayscale versus the SEC, where the court has said, okay, now you actually have to review the entire Grayscale spot Bitcoin ETF application, which is the transition from a trust, which they currently have, towards a spot Bitcoin ETF. So the entire sentiment is switching towards a positive one, in which we might be like 99% sure that we're going to get it. So that's why you see that every short dip on Bitcoin is getting bought up really fast, and that the momentum is just to the upside.
So it is an optimistic one, to say the least. And it is something, you're right, the kind of the social sentiment right now that we are seeing is extremely positive. I am going to take this opportunity now, because I think it's great to have you on the live stream, to ask you possibly to share some charts and kind of talk through what we have been seeing, because I think one thing that is pretty interesting right now is you've spoken about the ETH BTC chart and how that looks quite interesting at this moment in time. We're looking at kind of different metrics that are helping us evaluate the status of the market. Fear and greed index has shot up this week from around 55 to 71, and that consists of social sentiment and some other accumulating factors as well. So what kind of indicators are you looking out for now that really help us evaluate where we are in positions?
Well, let me get some charts up here. That's probably the best to do. Let me see. There we go. So the thing is, what I'm looking at right now with the markets is that if you look at ETH Bitcoin, it's definitely not on the rise at this point. And the reason for that is that everything is focused on Bitcoin, and I can swap towards Bitcoin really fast. But Bitcoin is currently getting the momentum because we've got the spot Bitcoin ETF, and in approximately 5 months from now, we've got the Bitcoin halving. So those two are basically a cocktail for strength on Bitcoin. And in order to have the altcoins or to have Ether standing out or performing well, you need to have strength in Bitcoin, because if there's confidence, people start to swap from Bitcoin towards altcoins. So what you see right now is that Ether Bitcoin against Bitcoin is selling off, which means that aside from new money, people are swapping their altcoins towards Bitcoin, at least in the case of Ethereum. In that aspect, if you go back in the cycles, this happens every time. So every time before the Bitcoin halving, the momentum goes towards Bitcoin. When Bitcoin tops out and consolidates, that is when the money starts to move towards altcoins. So what you see right now with the Fear and Greed index, I think it's like 70. That doesn't say much if you do not consider to put it into context. So if Bitcoin is at like 65K like the previous cycle and the Fear and Greed is going through the roof, of course it's telling you something. Right now it's just in the middle of a run, and we are unaware of how far Bitcoin can still go. So if you are going to look at Bitcoin at this stage, what we can see is that there are a few very important indicators, which is the fact that we have been holding above 25K. And the reason why that is important for the markets at this point is that in traditional markets, the 200 weekly EMA is usually the indicator for bull bear markets. So what we had to do with Bitcoin earlier in September, yes, just 1 month ago, we were still at 25K. We had to hold above the 200-week EMA to consider effect of a bullish continuation. Well, right now we are seeing it, and we are also seeing is that we are breaking above a resistance point, which is the 30K level, which you can see over here as well. We have been testing it multiple times, and it's a significant level, which means that in the previous cycle, we have been testing it as support many times. Now we flipped it resistance during the entire crash of Luna. And after that, we have been testing it a few times this year as well, which is pretty much comparable to what we witnessed in 2018, 2019, when we were facing the resistance of $6,000. People were expecting, hey, I'm going to short there, or we are going to reject from that level. We are not going to break out of it. It's kind of similar. And once you break through such a level, the confidence starts to grow. And also the arguments that an actual bull cycle will start to kick in, which as long as Bitcoin stays above this level is the case. But then you're also going to see that Bitcoin continues to show the strength, and the altcoins are not really following through on their Bitcoin pairs, just because the momentum is currently focused on Bitcoin, or specifically Bitcoin.
And I think that's the kind of the $1 million question that you've summarized there is this a normal pre-halving cycle and movement up and trajectory? We are seeing some pretty interesting revelations that have come from 2023 in the crypto markets. Julian Moreno actually put out a kind of an interesting statement on X. He is an analyst and researcher at Crypto Quant, and he was saying that this rally that we have seen this week was unique because it was more of a short squeeze rally rather than a long accumulation. And I want to get your take on that when we look at particularly this week and the market movements. Was that the case?
I think I think you can answer that question both for, I guess, Chainlink and for Bitcoin in a way that you can say Chainlink has been facing a resistance for more than a year, which was the $8.50 level. Once it starts to break through it, it's a huge short squeeze because shorting that level for the entire year makes sense, as people were making money out of it. And it's the most obvious resistance we are facing. The same is being done on Bitcoin. Just like the $6,000 level, people were shorting that level a lot. But what happens if you break through it? You're going to see that people are getting liquidated that are into shorts, but also other people are jumping into the markets because all of a sudden price breaks through it. So you get FOMO buyers or breakout buyers, which is just a chain reaction, which we're seeing right now. I think the difference is that in this market right now, you can see the open interest and you can see the net positions of everybody. So that's different from the previous cycle. And what we have seen currently is that prior to the breakout, we saw spot getting into the markets. And usually when you want to see strength, you don't want to see futures trading or futures long positions because that is just fake money. In the case of spot buying into Bitcoin, which has been happening or leading towards the breakout, that shows that there are actual new buyers getting into the markets, fueling the actual strength. And that brings me back to what I've been saying at the first question, which is right now, the big institutions from the US, not only BlackRock, but all the parties that are currently getting an ETF, are positioning themselves and need to buy Bitcoin. And that's just a cocktail that is showing strength in the markets. And that's what you can see by spot leading the actual breakout. And then after that, you get a short squeeze, of course. And now what you want to see is that we're continuing to see strength of buys. And in this week, we've had a correction to 33K, but we're just grinding back up, showing strength, and probably continuing with the rally.
And we have had one question come in from Ben. Thank you so much to everyone that is joining us from all over the world. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're joining us from. But we do have one question on if Bitcoin is bought OTC. If we are seeing these accumulations from the likes of BlackRock, ARK Invest, how is that bullish for BTC's price? So, Michael, what's your take on that?
Like most of the Bitcoins are being bought on OTC markets, but if it's being bought on the OTC markets, it is in some way also moving the regular markets, because if there are more buyers in the OTC markets than sellers, it is going to push the prices up. So the premium of the OTC deals are going to be higher, which means that the gap between the OTC market and the regular market is going to be slim, and it has to follow each other. So yes, most of those Bitcoins are being bought OTC over the counter. So it's not on Binance, or it's not Michael Saylor buying small amounts of Bitcoin on an exchange. But these two markets are still correlated to each other. So if I'm saying, hey, I want to buy 1,000 Bitcoin for a certain price, all the parties that are in that market will know that someone is buying 1,000 Bitcoin, which will automatically lead towards the regular markets also moving or following the OTC markets. The same way is kind of, if you have grayscale with GBTC, there was the premium during the bull market, because you could buy a GBTC share that represents some sort of Bitcoin. During the bull cycle, there's a premium, and during the bear market, there's a discount. The higher the discount, the better the actual level to buy. But that's also how it goes with these type of deals. They are correlated to each other, and they move both markets.
And Michael, you've been in crypto for several years, and you've been a trader for a very long time. How should people play this when it comes to, as we know, the US regulators do have a stern approach when it comes to crypto. How much is the market vulnerable at this moment in time? We do see they have a regulation by enforcement approach, especially the SEC. Is there a risk of a pullback if we do see any stop signs from the SEC? And as people that are watching this, traders, investors that are longer term alike, I think we're all kind of watching this like, how do we play this at this moment now?
Well, I think if you look at the markets right now and the regulators, the longer time passes, the more confidence and evidence we get that the SEC is losing ground. So if you go back in time a year ago, we had the grayscale and against the SEC case, and the SEC was cracking down on crypto because FTX collapsed. at this point, we're getting arguments for the other side, which is that they are progressive and working with the parties to approve the spot ETF. Grayscale is winning against the SEC for their transition from a trust towards the ETF as well. We've got the XRP case, which has been won by XRP. So you get more and more arguments that the regulators are losing grounds and that crypto is actually kind of having a victory. That's why price is currently going up too. In terms of trading and investing, I think the past year we've had crypto being punished in a way that people were super negative on the markets. So the valuation has probably just been lagging behind on the actual fundamental growth. And if you're looking at the markets right now and you feel like, hey, how am I going to get a position into the markets? Overall, the easiest way is just to DCA into the markets. I think that because of all the evidence that we're seeing, the approval is most likely going to take place, through which the valuation of Bitcoin is still relatively low compared to other assets that also have an ETF. So just DCAing into the market seems reasonable, or waiting this entire rally out and see a 30% correction. That's also a good way of getting into the markets. But overall, I think, as I mentioned, the evidence is just growing that we're going to get a new cycle finally.
Finally, you did mention a correction there. What kind of expectations are you having for a correction if you are predicting one?
I mean, right now what we see is that the price and sentiment are super positive. So what we're going to see leading into an approval is that we're going to continue having the rally of the price going up. So the parties still need to feed their entire ETF. There will be a lot of hype going into an approval, which is most likely going to happen in January. So price starts to overextend to the upside. And then when the ETF approval goes through, usually what you'll be seeing is that we're topping out. And then you get the case of buy the rumor, sell the news. So I think that until January, the price of Bitcoin will just continue to go to the upside. And then after the news event comes out, we have a swift correction and just a sideways period. So I think in terms of having more and more evidence that we are into an upward cycle, I would say wait it out until you get the approval, get the standard correction, and then get into the markets. Because the actual impact of a spot ETF will take place in the years after, because people start to buy, family offices, pension funds, everybody who wants to be into the markets need an ETF. So the impact will come afterwards.
So what you're saying here is this is just the beginning. Those that think in 2023 they might be a little bit late to crypto, we are still early on the bandwagon.
Yes, we are. I think we're going to have a very crazy bull cycle, yes. And probably it's going to be the final easy one, I would say.
Interesting. And then after that, you think crypto is going to be so widely used that maybe we'll see less price volatility in the markets, less higher highs?
I think a few arguments are for that. Like, if you look at the cycles, every cycle there's a new group of investors and participants getting into the markets. In this case, the institutional cycle is definitely there. We've got the spot ETFs. We probably are going to get options trading. All those derivatives are going to be there, so the big guys are jumping into it. If you compare it in terms of where we are, I think it's going to be compared to the dot-com bubble, which was also a cycle where the institutions were jumping into the markets, prices are going through the roof, we create a big bubble, and then it collapses and we go back down. So probably if we look at the cycle and the size of this cycle, you could expect this one to run to 10 to 15 trillion market cap, which is Bitcoin between 200 to 400K, which seems reasonable, but now it seems far-fetched, but probably it's going to be that one. And after that, we collapse. And then the question is, who is going to join after? So probably we're going to have a longer bear market after that, just because of the bubble collapsing, perhaps because we are going to have a global crisis. Any argument for that, which means that there are no new parties joining after that. So the market cap is going to be larger, no new participants, which means that the volatility will also slow down, just like we have been seeing with gold, for instance, but also after the dot-com bubble. It just took years before we got back towards those highs again.
So you've mentioned the time frame and also potential kind of economic and geopolitical factors there. We do have a question from Reza regarding interest rates and high interest rates. Would that make it difficult when it comes to needed liquidity that is entering for supplying the next bull market? So I'd like to get your take on that.
It's a good one. I mean, high interest rates, including quantitative tightening, which is that the balance sheet of the Fed has been reduced, so less liquidity, I would say. That is not really beneficial for the markets, and that has been the environment in 2022. Right now, we're getting into the end stage of what the Fed has been doing, so most likely we won't get any more hikes at this point, maybe a few more, but the curve is relatively topped out. Additionally, if you look at liquidity for the markets, as I mentioned, if there is a group of new investors joining the market, it's a new pool of liquidity getting into the Bitcoin markets. And for a Bitcoin market to move from 500 billion towards 1 trillion, you don't need 500 billion. A few billion is enough to actually make it move towards, well, 30-40% higher. Additionally, I don't think that the Fed can continue with this policy. And what we are seeing right now is that China is already using quantitative easing, which is that they are increasing the liquidity over there as they are facing a big crisis. One of the biggest real estate developers has been going bankrupt in the past few days. So it's not only the dollar, and it's not only solely the Fed, it is globally, and China has already started increasing the liquidity, which has been a trigger the last bull cycle to actually go higher and higher and higher.
And out of interest, how is stocks faring to crypto this week? Because it seems like this week has been exponential compared to the 2023 that we have had for crypto prices, but it doesn't seem like it's been reflective in the wider investment opportunities in the market.
No, look, I mean, stocks and indices are difficult at this point. I think the high interest rates are terrible for tech companies, and that's what we're seeing reflected in this market. Tesla has been having a rough week. Google has been having a rough week as well. So the tech stocks are currently in pain. Additionally, geopolitical, uncertainties are also not really benefiting the stocks and indices. So what we currently are seeing is that maybe finally, but Bitcoin is moving along with gold. We've seen that on and off during this past year. We've had it in March, where we had the entire collapse during the banks that were falling in the US. And after that, gold and Bitcoin were the ones that really started to stand out. So out of uncertainty, people start to buy safe havens, which are Bitcoin and gold. In this case, gold is back towards almost $2,000, made a U-turn after a pretty substantial correction, and Bitcoin is following through. So the correlation between these two are relatively high, and that is because of everything that's happening in the Middle East or in China. And I think that will continue to be the case for the next few years. So I think that commodities, crypto, are both going to be doing really well. And I don't believe that you should be into stocks, especially not in high-risk stocks at this point.
Interesting indeed. Now, we also have some comments that are coming through. So thank you to everyone that is commenting some constructive crypto questions for Michael. Quite a few mentions of altcoins and the altcoin market at present. We have a few people mentioning Solana, and I think if we look out, there's been some all-stars. You've mentioned earlier on in this interview, Chainlink is one of them, Injective, also a very strong week, Solana as well. So what's your take on the altcoin market at the moment, and what's your view on the kind of the ones to watch, as it were?
I mean, cycles repeat themselves, so it's just as we expect Bitcoin to have a 4-year cycle, we can also expect the same from the rest of the market. So I'm gonna share my screen again. What we're looking at is that Bitcoin has the 4-year cycle. So we see that Bitcoin starts to rally pre-halving, then has a correction, and then the bull market starts to expand after the Bitcoin halving. But if we look at some altcoins that are doing really well at this point, we should realize that Chainlink has its peak in August of 2020. And if we think about what happened during that period, it was because there was a so-called DeFi summer. So decentralized finance had its momentum during 2020. What you can expect from that is that alongside the updates that Chainlink has been doing, is that most likely in the first year of the bull market, which in this case is 2024, DeFi is starting to pick up. So Chainlink is one of those. It's an oracle. It has been ranging into a sideways period for more than a year. And during the previous bull cycle, it started to have some serious upwards momentum as well already, and also in the Bitcoin pair. So being into a cycle works on multiple ways. So being into the Bitcoin cycle is one, but then you also have the DeFi cycle, you've got the NFT cycle, and you've got the Ethereum cycle. And in this case, Chainlink most likely will continue to show strength just because it has been one of the early runners in the previous cycle too. Now, when you talk about Injective, which is a relatively new asset at this point, it has been around in 2021. It was a relatively new one. If you are looking at altcoins that are going to stand out, you have to be looking at altcoins that have not been into the previous cycle, or at least are relatively new. So there are not many bag holders, but from a technical aspect, they're solving an issue that the markets have. So out of the previous bull cycle, we've had some new problems that are arising, which are going to be fixed with the new project at this point. So Injective is one of those that is currently showing the momentum as it's relatively new. The same can be said about projects like Arbitrum, Optimism. Those big ones are most likely going to outperform as they are a relatively new one, just like Avalanche and Matic and Phantom have been doing really well in the previous cycle. Then Solana, I think Solana, the project itself, is doing really fine at this point and has just been pushed downwards when it comes to the entire saga with FTX. So I think it's just correcting itself back towards a real value instead of the pain that it has seen in the previous year.
Okay, understood. So it's almost just recovering from some of those 2022, 2023 market movements that we saw from the implications of FTX and the outspot from that.
Yeah, and I think SBF has been having a large share into Solana, but Solana is not SBF and SBF is not Solana. So I think the price has been dropping because of those two being named. But right now it's just going back to where it should be, as the entire Solana team is still working on the project itself. So I think that is an outlier of the entire market, but I think Chainlink should be categorized into the DeFi corner. You can also see that projects like Maker are doing really well at this stage. So I think if the cycles are going to repeat itself, you're probably going to expect a DeFi summer in 2024 again.
Interesting, because I was going to ask you, so obviously we had the DeFi summer, we had the NFT summer. You could say that last year was the layer 2 summer. Which of those was kind of most critical? And you mentioned then you think we're going to see another repeat of a DeFi summer in 2024.
I think all of them are significant in some way. Like we have experienced DeFi, we've experienced Metaverse, we have experienced AI, and we've had the NFTs. And I think it's all layers on top of Bitcoin or Ether, because we all need DeFi, we all need NFTs to actually build an ecosystem. And they had their first hype run in a way that NFTs were built through, or were used through all those PFPs or through Bored Apes, etc. What you can see right now is that NFTs and DeFi connected by real world assets or tokenizing assets like real estate. So there is going to be a new cycle, because from just Bitcoin, you can't build an entire ecosystem. From just Ethereum, you can't do it either. So I think they had their first hype run, and people are still stuck into that first hype run. But from here, you see the actual adoption taking place. So right now, you're going to, or in the next few years, you're going to see some things like art or like real estate being tokenized through a DeFi protocol, and then an NFT is attached to it to make sure that you're actually having that particular asset in your portfolio. So I think it's just progress, and that's how technology evolves itself.
And so now I want to touch on your comparative of this Bitcoin cycle compared to previous ones? Because a few times in this conversation, we've touched on kind of the traditional trends that you would see in the fairly new industry that is crypto. We do have a chart from Charles Edwards, which he was comparing this market cycle and saying that this market cycle is unique. And he gave a few of the reasons for it. So hash rate has been growing even in a bear market. We've had a record supply of long-term holders. The government's mining it. Lightning Network has hit $150 million plus. And then also we've seen adoption of kind of retail merchants being able to accept Bitcoin. What's your thoughts on this market cycle being different? And do you think this will be that kind of eureka moment for a new wave of Bitcoin hodlers, as it were?
In some way it's different, but in some way I think it's the same. What you can see right now is that because the markets are getting larger, more participants are joining the market. So you will see that Bitcoin gets a political agenda. Like for instance, in Argentina, it's relatively big right now with the race towards the one becoming a president. So third world countries are opting into Bitcoin because it's actually a savior for them. Aside from that fact, companies are also expanding towards Bitcoin at this point because there are solutions that they can actually integrate Bitcoin into their company. And additionally, regulations are just progressive for them, so they can actually finally adapt to it. So in some way, it's different because a new group of participants are joining into the markets. But as a fact, in that way, it's actually the same as the previous cycles, because 2017, we had the entire retail expansion. 2021, we had a particular one joining the markets, which was called Sam Bankman, and some VCs. And right now we see the cycle of the institutions joining in. So in some way it's different, but in most ways it's just the same as the previous cycle. And I think after this cycle, you will see the expansion through governments even more, that you will see the anti-dollarization, which is currently a big topic, is going to take place even more, especially from countries that are looking for a solution for their own weak currency.
So we are halfway through the week. We have noticed we've seen the prices increase. We've seen a lot of talk, some fair stability over the last 24 hours, which in crypto, a lot can happen in 24 hours. For the next kind of few days and also moving into next week, are there any things that you're keeping an eye out for, maybe kind of US economic indicators, things that you think might impact the price at all from a trading perspective?
I think the tech earnings are very important to understand, but as I mentioned, the correlation between these indices and Bitcoin is pretty low at this stage. So what I'm mostly concerned about is what is China doing at this stage and what is happening in the Middle East. I think if there is going to be some sort of peace in that region, which we all wish for, I think it's going to put the prices of gold at a substantial level lower, which most likely is going to do the exact same for Bitcoin. So I think those factors have to be taken into account, because if there is more and more uncertainty, like for instance another country jumping into the entire war or the US doing more, gold will rally and most likely Bitcoin will do the exact same. If all those things stay neutral and there is no real news coming out of the US of whether or not they are pulling the entire applications of the spot ETF, probably we're going to go higher, or at least stay above 30K, which we all wish for.
We're all keeping our fingers crossed, absolutely. And we also have some nice questions that have come through. So we also have one, which is from Ross. He's asking if you think that Netherlands is gonna beat Australia in the cricket tonight. So let's mix it up a little bit.
I'm not a big cricket fan, to be fair, but I saw that the Netherlands has won against South Africa, I guess. So, I mean, I'm more of a rugby fan than a cricket guy. So I hope they beat the Aussies, but I'm going to enjoy rugby during the next weekend.
I'm from Wales, so I'm also a rugby girl. And we also had one question that came through, which was, are we starting to see people FOMO into crypto? So thank you to whoever sent that question. I have lost it on the thread of questions. But what's your thought right now with the sentiment of retail FOMOing into crypto?
Well, look, I'm in the fortunate position that people ask me a lot. So it has been radio silence for the past year. And all of a sudden, the Dutch media are jumping onto Bitcoin again. I've got some old friends who ask me some things. So, yes, the FOMO is back in. And I think it's quite natural because markets are going up again and people seem to have some interest into crypto. And I had some conversations during the weekend with people who are not into crypto, but all of a sudden the entire uncertainty in the Middle East is going to be a topic that they wish to have gold, but also in that case, Bitcoin. So the entire topic is changing, which is for people holding Bitcoin or crypto. Of course, it's positive, but it's for kind of difficult argument that we're currently rallying in some way. But yes, the FOMO is back in, and I think the higher we go, the more we'll see it. And I think a lot of people are currently sidelined because they were not expecting this rally to take place. So yeah, if we break up to like 36, 37K, it will probably have some more FOMO into it.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for taking the time to speak to Coin Bureau. If you've got the mainstream media asking you questions about crypto, it's it's good news all around. But Michael, I really appreciate the time. I have left your description of socials in the description of this video. So for anyone that has enjoyed this interview and want to find out more about Michael, you can do so in the comments. Thank you so much for joining once again. Really appreciate it, as always.
Well, thank you very much for having me. And if there's anybody who has questions, my DMs are always open. And wish you all the best with this show as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And to everyone that has been watching on the live as well, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all of the questions. And if you are looking to check out our deals page, you can head over to the description of this video where we have links to resources and much more. Fantastic. Well, see you all again very soon.